Brooklyn, New York, a borough full of life, with its diverse neighborhoods, bustling streets, and the constant hum of city life. Nestled in this vibrant environment was James Madison High School, a respected institution in the heart of the community. It was here that LaToya Harris, a 34-year-old English teacher, spent her days. She had a reputation for being tough but fair, and her students often spoke of her with a mix of admiration and fear. LaToya had a sharp tongue and a keen intellect, traits that made her a force to be reckoned with in the classroom. At home, though, things were different. LaToya lived in a modest brownstone on a quiet street, far removed from the energy of the city. Her husband, Marcus, was a long-haul truck driver, often away for days, sometimes weeks at a time. Their marriage had started with passion and love, but over the years, it had grown cold. The long absences, the missed anniversaries, and the mundane routine of everyday life had taken their toll. LaToya found herself feeling increasingly isolated and unfulfilled, trapped in a life that had lost its spark. It was during one of Marcus's extended trips that LaToya first noticed Jamal Thompson. Jamal was a senior, 17 years old, with a natural charisma that made him popular among his peers. He was a star on the basketball team, tall and athletic, with a smile that could light up a room. But beneath his confident exterior, Jamal was struggling. His grades were slipping, and he was in danger of not graduating. LaToya, always wanted to help a student in need, offered to tutor him after school. Their sessions started out innocently enough, focused on catching up with schoolwork and preparing for exams. But as they spent more time together, LaToya began to notice things about Jamal she hadn't before. The way his eyes lingered on her a little too long, the casual touches that sent a thrill down her spine, the way he seemed to hang on her every word. There was an electricity between them, an unspoken attraction that neither could ignore. One evening, after an especially intense study session, Jamal leaned in closer than usual. His breath was warm against her skin as he whispered something that made her laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. Without thinking, LaToya reached out and touched his arm. In that moment, something shifted. Jamal turned toward her, his eyes dark with desire, and before she could stop herself, their lips met in a kiss that was as passionate as it was forbidden. That kiss was the beginning of an affair that would consume them both. LaToya knew it was wrong, knew that she was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But the thrill was too intoxicating to resist. Jamal made her feel alive again, made her feel wanted in a way that Marcus hadn't in years. They began meeting in secret, stealing moments in empty classrooms, in LaToya's car, in the dark corners of the school where no one would think to look. But Jamal wasn't the only one who noticed a change in LaToya. Rashad Williams, a 16-year-old junior and star football player, had always had a thing for his English teacher. He was cocky and confident, with a swagger that made him irresistible to most girls his age. But LaToya wasn't like the other girls. She was older, more sophisticated, and Rashad was determined to get her attention. He started staying after class, asking for help with assignments he didn't really need help with, finding excuses to be near her. At first, LaToya brushed off Rashad's advances. She was already involved with Jamal, and the last thing she needed was another complication. But Rashad was persistent, and eventually, LaToya found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. He was different from Jamal, bolder, more aggressive, with a confidence that was impossible to resist. One day, after a particularly heated argument with Jamal, LaToya found herself alone with Rashad in her classroom. The tension between them was palpable, and when Rashad leaned in to kiss her, LaToya didn't pull away. Their affair was different from the one she had with Jamal. With Rashad, it was all about the physical, about satisfying a need that had been building inside her for years. They were reckless, meeting in risky places, pushing the boundaries of what was safe. LaToya knew she was playing with fire, but the thrill was addictive. Rashad made her feel powerful, like she was in control for the first time in years. But the fire was far from out. LaToya found herself drawn to yet another student, Andre Mitchell. Andre was 18, a senior like Jamal, but he couldn't have been more different. Quiet, studious, and thoughtful, Andre was the type of student who stayed after class to discuss literature and philosophy, not to flirt with his teacher. He had a depth that intrigued Latoya, a sensitivity that reminded her of the dreams and ambitions she'd once had before life had worn her down. Andre had always admired Latoya from a distance. She was everything he aspired to be, intelligent, cultured, and strong-willed. When he started spending time alone with her after school, discussing books and ideas, he felt a connection that was deeper than anything he'd experienced with his peers. Latoya, too, found herself opening up to Andre in ways she hadn't with Jamal or Rashad. Their conversations were intense, filled with shared insights and personal confessions. And it wasn't long before their relationship crossed a line from intellectual to intimate. Their first kiss was tender, almost hesitant, a stark contrast of fiery passion she shared with Jamal and Rashad. With Andre, it was about more than just the physical. It was about the emotional connection, the sense of being understood. Latoya knew that she was in too deep, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. She craved the attention, the excitement, the feeling of being desired by these young men. But as the weeks went on, the pressure of maintaining 3 secret affairs began to weigh heavily on her. She was constantly on edge, terrified that someone would find out, that her career, her marriage, her life would be destroyed. The thrill of the affair was starting to wear off, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The boys, too, were becoming more demanding, more possessive, each one wanting more of her time, her attention. The tension reached a breaking point when Jamal, Rashad, and Andre started to suspect that they weren't the only ones in Latoya's life. Each one began to notice the subtle signs, the way she seemed distracted when they were together, the mysterious text messages, the occasional slip of the tongue. Jealousy started to brew, and with it came anger, resentment, and a desire to confront the truth. Brooklyn, with its crowded streets and watchful neighbors, was about to become the epicenter of a scandal that would shatter lives. Latoya had thought she could control the situation, that she could keep her secrets hidden. But she was about to learn that the web she had spun was far more tangled than she had ever imagined. The consequences of her actions were closing in, and the price she would pay for her forbidden thrill was far greater than she could have ever anticipated. The autumn months in Brooklyn brought a chill to the air, but inside the walls of James Madison High School, the tension was heating up. Latoya Harris found herself increasingly entangled in the web she had woven, as her relationships with Jamal, Rashad, and Andre became more intense and more dangerous. What had started as a thrilling escape from her mundane life was now spiraling out of control, and Latoya was beginning to feel the pressure. Jamal was the first to notice that something was wrong. What had once been a passionate, exhilarating affair was starting to feel different. Latoya was distracted, distant even, and their stolen moments were becoming fewer and farther between. Jamal was no fool. He could tell that something or someone else was occupying her time. His suspicions grew, and with them a dark jealousy he couldn't shake. Rashad, too, was becoming restless. He thrived on attention and wasn't used to being ignored. When Latoya began canceling their meetings, coming up with excuses that didn't quite add up, Rashad's easygoing demeanor turned sour. He started to push back, showing up unannounced, demanding her time, her affection. He wasn't used to sharing, and the idea that Latoya might be seeing someone else lit a fire of anger inside him. Andre, on the other hand, was more subtle in his unease. He noticed the changes in Latoya, the way she seemed preoccupied even when they were alone, the way her mind seemed to wander during their conversations. Andre was sensitive, thoughtful, and deeply in love with Latoya in a way the other boys weren't. He could sense that something was wrong, but he didn't know what. All he knew was that the woman he adored was slipping away from him, and the thought of losing her filled him with dread. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between the boys grew unbearable. They were like predators circling the same prey, each one vying for Latoya's attention, each one determined to be the one she chose. Jamal, driven by jealousy, began to watch Latoya more closely. He followed her after school, noticed the way she lingered in the halls, the way she seemed to have secret meetings behind closed doors. It didn't take long for him to realize he wasn't the only one. One evening, after a particularly tense day, Jamal decided to confront her. He waited for Latoya in the parking lot after school, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing with thoughts of betrayal. When Latoya finally emerged, he stepped out of the shadows, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Who is it?" he demanded, his voice low but intense. "Who else are you seeing?" Latoya froze, her heart stopping for a moment as she realized that the carefully constructed facade she had built was beginning to crumble. She tried to play it off, to laugh it away, but Jamal wasn't having it. He stepped closer, his body tense, his eyes burning with a jealousy Latoya hadn't seen before. "Don't lie to me, Latoya," he warned, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know you're with someone else. I want to know who." Latoya hesitated, caught between the truth and the lies she'd been telling for months. Before she could respond, Rashad appeared. His usual swagger was replaced by a simmering anger. He had seen them together, had noticed the way Jamal seemed to have a special hold over Latoya, and he wasn't about to let it slide. "What's going on here?" Rashad asked, his tone accusatory as he approached the two. He looked from Jamal to Latoya, his expression darkening as the pieces began to fall into place. Jamal turned to face Rashad, his fists clenching at his sides. "You tell me," he spat. "What the hell are you doing here, Rashad?" Before Rashad could answer, Andre appeared at the edge of the parking lot, having seen the other two boys from a distance. Unlike Jamal and Rashad, Andre had never been confrontational, but the sight of the two boys with Latoya, the realization that his worst fears were coming true, pushed him to act in a way he never had before. "What are you doing?" Andre's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that Latoya hadn't heard before. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers, searching for answers, for some kind of reassurance that what he was seeing wasn't real. Latoya was trapped. The three boys she had been juggling were now standing before her, their anger, jealousy, and betrayal written across their faces. There was no way out, no way to defuse the situation. The truth was out, and the consequences were about to come crashing down. Jamal, his emotions boiling over, took a step toward Latoya. "How could you do this?" he demanded, his voice cracking with pain. "I thought I meant something to you." Rashad, never one to back down from a fight, shoved Jamal back. "You're not the only one she's been playing man," he snarled. "But I'm not about to let her make a fool out of me." Andre, standing on the edge of confrontation, felt a surge of emotion he couldn't control. He had always been the quiet one, the thinker, the one who avoided conflict. But seeing Latoya in the middle of this, seeing the way she was being pulled in different directions by Jamal and Rashad, something inside him snapped. "You're both wrong," Andre said, his voice trembling with intensity. "She's not some game you can win. She's a person, and you're tearing her apart." The situation escalated quickly. Rashad, his temper unchecked, swung at Jamal, his fist connecting with a sickening thud. Jamal stumbled back, but quickly retaliated, launching himself at Rashad with a fury that had been building for weeks. The two boys were soon locked in a brutal fight, fists flying, as Latoya watched in horror, unable to stop what she had set in motion. Andre, desperate to protect Latoya, tried to pull Rashad away, but in the chaos, he was dragged into the fray. The three boys, once friends, or at least acquaintances, were now enemies, driven to violence by their love for the same woman. Latoya's attempt to intervene were futile. The boys were too far gone, too consumed by their anger and jealousy to listen to reason. As the fight raged on, the situation grew more dangerous. In the heat of the moment, Rashad grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground, swinging it wildly at Jamal. The blow landed with a sickening crack, and Jamal went down hard, blood pouring from a gash on his head. Latoya screamed, rushing to Jamal's side, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Seeing Jamal on the ground, motionless, Andre lost control. He lunged at Rashad, tackling him to ground, his fists pounding into Rashad's face with fury that surprised even himself. Rashad fought back, but he was dazed, the fight quickly slipping out of his control. In the chaos, Latoya scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. She had to do something, had to stop this before it got even worse. But as she looked around, she realized with a sickening dread that there was no stopping it. The boys were out of control, and she was powerless to stop the violence she had unwittingly set in motion. Andre, in a blind rage, reached for the metal pipe Rashad had used to strike Jamal. He swung it at Rashad, the force of the blow knocking him unconscious. The fight was over, but the damage was irreparable. Rashad lay on the ground, blood pooling beneath him, while Jamal remained motionless, his breathing shallow and labored. Latoya stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The boys she had cared for, had loved, in her own way, were now lying broken and bloodied at her feet. The reality of the situation began to sink in, the gravity of what she had done crushing her under its weight. The affair, the secrets, the lies, it had all led to this moment, a moment that would change all their lives forever. The sound of sirens in the distance brought Latoya back to reality. Someone had called the police, and they were on their way. Panic set in as Latoya realized the enormity of what had just happened. There was no way to cover this up, no way to make it right. The truth was out, and there would be consequences. Consequences she had never imagined when she first crossed that line with Jamal. When the police arrived, the scene was one of chaos. Rashad was taken away in an ambulance, still unconscious, while Jamal was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Andre, dazed and covered in blood, was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car. Latoya was questioned on the spot, her mind numb as she tried to explain the unexplainable. The media quickly descended on the school, turning the story into a national sensation. The scandal rocked the Brooklyn community, and Latoya's life was torn apart. Her marriage, her career, her reputation. Everything was destroyed in an instant. She was suspended from her job pending an investigation, and soon the full extent of her relationships with Jamal, Rashad, and Andre came to light. As the story spread, Brooklyn became a hotbed of gossip and speculation. Local news channels set up camp outside Latoya's once quiet brownstone, capturing every moment of her descent from a respected teacher to a public disgrace. Neighbors who had once admired her for her dedication to her students now whisper about her scandalous behavior. Latoya found herself isolated, not just from her community, but from her own family. Her husband, Marcus, returned to find their life in ruins. The betrayal cut deeply, and despite his initial shock, he was unable to forgive. He filed for divorce, seeking to distance himself from the chaos that had engulfed their lives. Marcus moved away from Brooklyn, leaving Latoya behind in a place that now felt like a prison. Without her marriage and her career, Latoya was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. The weight of her decisions began to crush her. Once a proud and assertive woman, she now struggled with overwhelming feelings of guilt and shame. She found it difficult to face herself in the mirror, let alone the world outside. The emotional toll of the scandal led her into a spiral of depression, where she questioned every choice she had made and the life she had thrown away. The boys involved in the scandal each dealt with their trauma in their own ways. Jamal, critically injured from the confrontation, faced a long and painful recovery. The once promising athlete was now left with physical scars and emotional wounds that haunted him daily. His dreams of a sports career were dashed, and he struggled to find a new direction in life, grappling with a sense of betrayal and the violence he had endured. Rashad, despite being a key player in the altercation, was left with his own set of challenges. His injuries were severe, and the incident had a lasting impact on his mental health. The experience made him withdrawn and bitter. He faced the public's judgment and the legal consequences of his actions, all while trying to deal with the trauma of what had happened. Rashad's confidence was shattered, and he struggled to rebuild his sense of self amidst the chaos. Andre, too, was deeply affected. He was sent to juvenile detention for his role in the incident. The experience was harsh, and the time spent there forced him to confront the gravity of his actions. Although he had acted out of what he believed was defense, the reality of the violence he had participated in weighed heavily on him. Andre tried to use his time in detention to reflect and to work on personal growth, but the path to redemption was long and uncertain. The aftermath of the scandal left a deep scar on the Brooklyn community. James Madison High School, once a place of learning and growth, now stood as a symbol of betrayal and failure. The school administration faced harsh criticism for their oversight and the lack of preventive measures. Efforts were made to rebuild trust within the community, but the damage had been done. The focus shifted to ensuring the safety and well-being of students and addressing the systemic issues that had allowed the situation to unfold. Latoya's story, while tragic, became a cautionary tale. It served as a reminder of the consequences of abuse of power and the importance of vigilance in protecting those who are most vulnerable. The community, while scarred, began to heal, with support systems put in place to address the emotional and psychological impact on everyone involved. In the end, LaToya's downfall was a complex and multifaceted tragedy. It was a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the devastating consequences of choices driven by desire and desperation. The echoes of that fateful night lingered long after the headlines faded, a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the enduring impact of one's actions on the lives of others. LaToya Harris's life was irrevocably changed as she faced the grim reality of her situation. With the trial concluded and the media frenzy gradually fading, she was left to grapple with the consequences of her actions. Her marriage had dissolved, her career was in ruins, and her reputation was shattered beyond repair. She had been sentenced to 25 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 15 years, a harsh but inevitable outcome, given the gravity of her crimes. If you found this story valuable, please subscribe for more. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time,